taxes for, the way that they are able to manipulate the cost of living and just constantly make it spiral out of control by constantly inflating the monetary supply. 22% of every dollar bill that has ever been printed was printed this year. Almost 1 out of every $4 bills that have ever existed, Federal Reserve notes that have ever existed, were made this year. That is how much they are inflating the monetary supply. All of that feeds into the government's control of banks. Central banks need to end across the board, not just the Fed, but the entire concept of the government being in charge of your currency. That has been an utter and abject failure. Actually, failure is the wrong word. It is working as intended. It has failed you, but it has worked perfectly for the politicians and the cronies and the bureaucrat class that they've created and the cottage industry that they've created around it. We believe that government should not be involved in the issuance of currency. That should be handled by the free market, and here's why. Anytime you get a service from a monopoly, they don't have to give you good value. You just have to take it or leave it. When that monopoly is government, you don't even get to leave it. You either have to take it or take it. It really doesn't matter. So that's why your currency continues to lose value, because they don't have to give you value for your currency. They can just keep printing out more and more and more and more money and doing whatever they want with it, sticking you with the bill with interest for it, and also inflating the monetary supply and printing out that money and causing the value of the dollars they do let you keep go down over time, which is why the cost of living keeps going up. So the answer is instead to allow it to be handled by private competing providers of currency, probably cryptocurrency, but honestly, whatever currency works best, whatever currency wins over the consumers the most. Because if I have Spike Coin, and I tell everyone, come use Spike Coin, and you go, well, how does it work? And I go, Spike Coin, you're not going to use my Spike Coin, right? Because I didn't actually explain how it works. But if I have Spike Coin, and I prove that it works, and I prove that it actually has scarcity, and that it actually gains value over time, I know that I'm going to do your business. But if it doesn't gain value over time as much as, where's Chrissy? Wherever Chrissy went, Chrissy Coin, then I'm going to start losing business to Chrissy Coin. So that makes me want to compete for your business. When the market is the one providing instead of a monopoly, the consumer, you are the king, and that should be the case with currency as well. So the IMF, the World Bank, central banking in general, we need to take away the power of government to be in charge of issuing currency and telling us that we have to use it. It needs to be handled on a private level. It needs to be handled by free market providers, and we will all do better as a result. And government now will have to actually demonstrate value when they get money from us. They have to actually show that the money that they're spending has good purpose, or else we don't have to give it to them. They can't print it out endlessly. So that's the answer to that. Any other questions?
Hey, I'm actually an undecided voter.
Okay.
I can hear you. I want to listen to you and get your thoughts.
Sure.
So why should I vote for you and Joe?
Well, I could spend hours talking about that, obviously, but I think the long story short of it is, as I said kind of in my little opening speech there, we've seen the alternative. We've seen what Republicans and Democrats have done, and we've seen, and more importantly, we've seen why it has led to that. It's not the individual politicians that are the problem. Joe and I aren't angelic beings that are somehow, magically better than any other person. It's the ideas that we have. Yes, it's also our character. It's also our trustworthiness. It's also our history that you can see that we have been people that have provided value to others, that we are entrepreneurs, that we care about people around us. That matters as well. But moving forward, long after you and I are gone, and the policies that have been put in place by whoever is in power continue to live on past us, that's what matters. We've seen the policies of Republicans and Democrats, and they are built around the central premise that they can take from us whenever they want to, that they can order us around whenever they want to, and that we, for the most part, just have to live with it. There's no reason to expect anything but the harmful and abusive and inequitable outcomes that have happened as a result of that. The massive spiraling out of control of the cost of healthcare, the cost of housing, the cost of higher education, the cost of everything else. This total botching of this pandemic, where for the first 2 months that the virus was here, they didn't allow healthcare workers to test for the virus, even though millions Millions of test kits were already being made in this country. They were all having to be sold overseas because the CDC and the FDA wouldn't sign off on it. We saw, and we didn't need a pandemic to tell us our healthcare system was bad. We saw how these anti-science and anti-human lockdowns not only failed to slow the spread of the virus, but have actually led to massive increases in other things that have a higher rate of fatality than COVID-19 does. Things like homelessness, child malnutrition, untreated cancer, because many hospitals, they aren't allowed to actually treat anything else but COVID-19. Hospitals getting shut down as a result of only having to treat respiratory crises, which they lose money on. So at a time when we need hospitals the most, they're getting shut down because of bad government policy. People that are unable to go to get treatment for mental health crises, people that are getting untreated depression, child malnutrition, I think I already said that. All of these are issues that are actually worse than the problem that they were trying to solve. And if they really cared about solving that problem, they would have just let medical professionals do their job. This is a perfect example of what happens when we have too much control by government. What Joe and I believe, what libertarians believe, is that when we dismantle these bad centrally planned ideas and we just empower and allow people who actually do these things for a living, that will be able to deal with this pandemic without shutting everything down and ruining people's lives left and right. We'll be able to reduce the cost of healthcare by just getting rid of the bureaucracy and red tape that accounts for at least 75% of the cost of it. Get rid of things like certificate of need laws. Get rid of things like patent protections for patents that have been around for 100 years or longer. Things like insulin and epinephrine, things that cost pennies in other countries. They're being charged thousands and tens of thousands of dollars here because they can't, because the government's protecting them. Getting rid of things like that. Getting rid of police brutality by ending qualified immunity, so that bad actors in government are held accountable when they hurt us, when they hurt our friends and our loved ones. Ending things like civil asset forfeiture, something that Joe Biden started. Civil asset forfeiture, which is where the government takes from you if they accuse you of a crime and uses it to pay for your prosecution instead of allowing you to use your own property to pay for your defense. Total violation of your due process rights. And then by some miracle you're found guilty, you're found not guilty, or the charges are dropped, you then have to take them to court to try to get your money back, even though it was just proven in court that you should have never had it taken from you. Ending things like mandatory minimum sentencing, ending the war on drugs, ending the militarization of the police, ending the wars overseas and bringing the troops home. These are the kind of things that happen when we elect people into office, in this case in the White House, Joe and myself, Kevin Cohen for Congress, Libertarians running up and down the ballot. This is what happens when we put people in office and recognize that the problem is not you, the problem is power. The problem is not any person here, and for that matter, the problem isn't individual politicians. The problem is a system that is built on centralizing power and giving a small, relative handful of people so much power over everyone else's lives that will always lead to bad outcomes. So if you believe that things are going poorly, if you believe that you do best when you are most free, if you believe that we should end things like police brutality and the war on drugs, the wars overseas, if you think that we should be reducing the cost of healthcare and allowing healthcare workers to do their jobs and save lives, if you believe that education is best handled by teachers and not bureaucrats and cronies, then I invite you to vote for us.
Damn good answer. Thank you.
And that was my short version. I could go on for hours. Because you are the power. That would have been a terrible answer to that question, by the way. Why should I vote for you? Why should you vote for me? Because you are the power. Any other questions?
So there's a lot of government-appointed lawmakers that we don't vote for, like CDC, EPA.
Yeah.
Is there, I don't know, is there anything that the President and Vice President can do about those, or is that up to Congress?
Getting rid of them? No.
Okay.
Defanging them while we're in there? Yeah, absolutely. The President has the sole authority of who is or is not. Every person in the executive branch serves at the pleasure of the President, or does not serve at the pleasure of the President. All regulations and executive orders are done at the pleasure of the President. Now there are some things that are actually mandated by Congress, but that's a very, very small and narrow amount of the regulations that are out there. All those executive orders can be undone by executive order. almost all of the regulations that are done at the executive level can be undone at the executive level. So there's a lot of, that's why it's important to try to run for the White House. Yes, we can't just go in and undo all the laws and the agencies, but we can fire a hell of a lot of people. And we can undo a lot of really bad regulations. We can go through all of the regulatory burdens that are out there with a fine-tooth comb. And if they aren't there specifically to protect and affirm the rights, lives, and property of the people, which is the only purpose of any kind of regulation that's coming out of the White House, then it goes. Obama and Trump have both bragged about having a pen and a phone. Joe is going to have a giant eraser and a shredder, and that's how a lot of stuff's going to get undone by executive order. So that it can be done at that level. With that said, long term, if Joe is replaced by a Republican, or if Libertarians are replaced in the White House by a Republican, which history shows us, rarely does a party stay in very long. That can all be just undone just as quickly, which is why, while it can be defanged temporarily, the real answer is to get Libertarians into Congress. The real answer is to get Libertarians into the Senate, to get them into governor's mansions, to get them into state houses, to get them into mayor's houses, to get them into city councils and things like that. And the real answer outside of that, because we often get focused on the minutia of, well, how do we accomplish this one thing? The real answer is that we have to change the cultural conversation in this country. Because once that happens, it doesn't even matter if the Libertarian Party wins or not. We will, but it doesn't matter when we win or don't win. Right now, big government statists are in control of the cultural conversation, which means that it really doesn't matter to them whether Republicans or Democrats get elected. They win anyway. Government and all of its mechanisms continue to grow unabated. It may grow a little bit faster this way and a little bit slower this way, but at the end of the day, rising tides are raising all the boats in that situation. We need to switch that around, change that tide around, so that now people are talking about how difficult government is making their lives, about how much better they do when they were free. And when we do that, then we win in the White House, we win in the Congress, we win in the Senate, and even if we're not winning in those races, or the races that we don't win, the people are still pushing them for more liberty. So there's many aspects of it, but for your specific question with the White House, yeah, we can really just at least temporarily undo all that stuff while we're in the White House. So thank you. So unless there are any other questions, I'd be happy to do any selfies.
Oh, I've got one. Common report by people who don't know what libertarianism is that libertarianism is a philosophy for privileged white men who just think that they're going to be the next millionaire.
Yes.
What does libertarianism offer to poor people who they depend on Medicaid for their health care, they depend on food stamps to eat, that if they didn't have government assistance, they wouldn't be able to survive.
Right.
And people will look at, on the surface, like, oh, you just want to get rid of all these systems, then you must want poor people to die.
So
how do we answer that?
So before that, show of hands. Who here is a multi-millionaire? Who here is just a multi-millionaire? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that. Who here is a billionaire? I didn't mean to skip you. Okay, so what I have found is that libertarians generally are pretty much working class folks. They're pretty much in the middle rungs of the economic ladder, and there's a good reason for that. We recognize that this system doesn't benefit us, and we want to dismantle it. Now, going back to your question about the social safety net. When Joe first ran in 1996 for vice president, her running mate was one of the best libertarian candidates, and this is my opinion, best libertarian candidates that we've ever run, a man named Harry Brown. And what Harry Brown used to say, and I butchered this, I need to remember what this quote is because I butcher it every time, but basically what he said is that government goes up to someone who's perfectly fine, beats them up, breaks their leg, takes their wallet, uses a little bit of the money out of it to buy them a crutch, hands them a crutch and says, hey, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have that crutch. Well, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't need a crutch. This goes back to your question about the social safety net. The reason so many people are in a social safety net is because all the ladders were taken out and they can't climb out of it. They're stuck in that net. I have done door knocking tours in housing projects and spoken to people in some of the worst housing conditions in this country. Totally substandard housing. Yeah, it's free after everything was stolen from them, but it's free, but they hate it. No one I talked to said, please get off my doorstep. I just want my free stuff. No one said that. In fact, every single person I met there, almost every single person I met, had a business, a side hustle. But it was a business, something that they did, a service that they provided. Everything from mowing lawns, braiding hair, doing roofs, doing plumbing, electrical work, DJing, food service, everything you can possibly think of, these folks were doing. The kind of things that we want, that we want and need every single day. But they were doing it illegally because they couldn't afford the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in compliance costs to be able to do it legally. They couldn't afford the licensing fees. They couldn't afford the minimal educational requirements to braid hair. They couldn't afford the zoning laws that make it illegal for you to do business in your home in many cases. They couldn't afford that stuff. So they just did it anyway. They did it illegally. But because they're doing it illegally, they can't market. I've been in business for over 20 years. The number one thing in business is market, 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 market. More important than anything else, make sure every single person that you can possibly tell knows what you do, how you do it, and how great you are at it. And they have to do the opposite. They have to tell people, okay, I'll do it for you, and I'll do it for that guy over there, but be real careful about who you tell. I gotta keep this on the down low because I don't want the police to come up and use civil asset forfeiture to steal everything from me without trial and then kick me out of my housing. So just don't tell anyone. I've met people that should be millionaires. And I met many more that should be able to feed their families on that and help grow and create jobs and pull other people out of poverty with them and grow their communities financially. But they can't. These stupid laws that Republicans and Democrats have put in place. So the answer to your question is that most people that are on the social media would not be in it if we simply remove the burden and put the ladders back. So we can find out about whether the elderly and people like that. There are going to be some people that remain on the safety net as we begin the process of weaning our society off of these things. We have no interest, Joe and I have no interest in telling people, telling that person with the crutch, that the government put them on a crutch, going, oh, you poor person, look at what government's done to you. We'll fix this, and we take the crutch and walk away. That's not going to fix it. Not only is it not going to fix it, but it's going to make people hate us. We'll never get elected to anything else again. And frankly, if we propose that, they won't even let us anywhere near power anyway. If we go in and say, our number one priority is taking everyone's crutches, and if your grandmother has a breathing tube, I got some bad news for you. If we run on that, we are screwed. We will never make it anywhere in office. If instead we say that we're going to put the ladders back so that people don't need to be on the social safety net, take care of the people who are currently on it and we can't get out of it, and work towards making it so that in the future, things like charity and mutual aid will be able to take care of these problems moving forward in the future, that's actually a viable solution that gets us elected and solves the problem. And I'm more focused on solving the problem than passing a purity litmus test in the meantime. So that's my answer to that. We have no interest in taking anything from anyone. We have an interest in removing the barriers and burdens that they can have even better than the substandard things that were stolen from them first. Hey, sure.
I've noticed in all gatherings I've been to, with this being somewhat of an exception, that most people who claim to be libertarian and have their ideals are specifically white men. Do you know why that is? Why other groups tend to be less involved in how we might cater the message to speak better to them? To those other groups?
There are many different theories as to why libertarianism is dominated by white people, or the number of libertarians are mostly white and mostly male. And it's probably a combination of things. First of all, this country is mostly white, and statistically, men are more likely to be politically involved than women, although that has actually been kind of balancing out over the last couple of decades. So there's probably some of that. I think there's also just inertia. If you were a party started by white men who primarily talk to other white men, then that keeps moving forward from there. If people go, let's just message to who we know, it's going to look like the people that are already there. There's not anything necessarily bad about that. Some of my best friends are white men. So it's, there's nothing necessarily bad about that. But I do think that we are sometimes limited in our ability to be able to reach others. My experience has been, and I am a white man, my experience has been that when we reach people with our message by starting by listening, that helps, because part of inertia is that if you are a mostly white male group and you reach out to people who are not white or male and say, hey, come on over to our thing, we'd like to talk to you about it, they might be a little wary of it, because in the same way that we tend to stick to our groups, a lot of people also socially tend to stick to their own groups. Not always, but that tends to happen. If instead we say, hey, we're with the Libertarian Party of Ohio, or the Libertarian Party of whatever your local region is, or I'm Spike Cohen, I'm running for vice president, or I'm such and such and I'm running for whatever, I'd like to come to your next event and listen to what you have to say. I did this in Columbus. So during the Libertarian Convention of Ohio convention, I was told that there was a Black Lives Matter rally happening at the State House. And I said, well, I know where I want to be. So we went there, and I went with a few different people. Yeah, you guys came. Yeah, a few people came there with us. Kevin Kahn came there. We had some Oscar Herrera came there, and so we had a few people come, candidates and just activists and supporters that came. And I went there, and they asked me if I wanted to talk, if I wanted to give a speech, and I said, no, I'm good. I want to hear what you have to say. And so I listened to them. I didn't spend hours listening to them. I listened for like, what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? I just listened to what they had to say. And I asked some follow-up questions for context for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to get the specifics of what they wanted, and I wanted them to know that I actually was listening and had follow-up questions, demonstrating in a relatively short period of time that I gave a crap about them, right? The next step, after I had listened to them, after I had asked, what's that?
You listen some more.
Yeah, I listened some more, yeah. After listening and listening and listening and asking questions and listening, then I demonstrated that I had been listening. I reflected back what they said, that I understood the issues that they were talking about, and that we had solutions to them. Then I presented those solutions. Inside of about a half hour, I walked into a group of people who had never heard of me or the Libertarian Party ever before, and were very, very skeptical of why we were there, especially because we got there the same time that the Boot Boys did. So a bunch of white people were showing up, some of them in Hawaiian outfits and guns. And by the time we were done, we got an endorsement from them. They actually live streamed saying that they were supporting. They didn't even know, they called us the Liberation Party. They had never heard of libertarianism. But they endorsed us on the spot because we took the time to listen to them. Now, that was an example of it going really, really, really well.
Yeah.
There are times that you'll go into other people's spaces, you listen to what they have to say, you'll reflect back that you heard what that they were saying, and present your solutions, and they'll go, all right, well, I don't think I like that, but thanks for your time. That's also fine. It's more important in those moments that you leave them with a warm and fuzzy feeling. You've made your points, they heard them. You do not have to, beat them into submission verbally until they eventually shrug their shoulders and go, okay, fine, pal, whatever. Just leave them with those seeds that you planted and a good feeling, because that's going to germinate, and they're going to say, wow, that went really well. Some of that stuff sounded crazy. I don't know how we're supposed to build roads that way, but anyway. But they were good. They were good folks, and he was listening to what I had to say. From there, moving forward, you can keep those relationships going. We got 8 minutes. So from there, 8 minutes including the photos. Yeah. Okay, cool. So from there they can just keep learning from that, and you developed you started a rapport, and they can build from that. Who here has always been a libertarian their entire lives? Show of hands. Exactly.
Well, they consider
I have
it
that, but I didn't
now.
know it.
Okay, who here self-described as libertarians or not? Exactly. We all had someone bring us here. We all had something that happened that brought us here. You can and will be the thing that brings people here. Some of you already are the thing that brings people here. And that's all you have to do. And sometimes it means going out of our comfort zones. I mean, my first couple times of going to Black Lives Matter rallies, I didn't know what to expect. And I just went. I went to, anti-lockdown protests. I actually recently led an anti-lockdown protest in Miami. I've gone to Second Amendment protests. I've gone to gun rights rallies and things like that. Sometimes go where you might be the only libertarian there, or the only one who knows you're a libertarian there, and that's okay. That's okay. Just go there to listen to them, and then once you've done that, then you can take them on that journey. Just develop good relationships. It's how anything works. Just develop good relationships, and it is not our ideology that is the reason that we are mostly white and male. I think it is more interpersonal stuff, and we can overcome that by having a different attitude about how we reach out to people. So thank you guys. So we have, I think, 6 minutes left, so I want to make sure everyone gets photos. Anyone who wants a photo and is not going to be at any of my other campaign stops, please come up, give your phone.
Okay, he's gonna take photos, and we're going
Give
on to
your
the next.
phone
We're going on to the next
Quinn.
stop in
He will
Ohio.
take your photos.
I think the next stop somewhere up track
And
Columbus.
if anyone wanted to get in,
So I'll be back streaming
just
live.
let me know and we can do that as well.
Y'all want to do it in front of the Waffle House?
Oh yeah. Let's go over to where the Waffle House is. The Waffle House is in the background.
And please do stop and have some food.